Hello, Mavericks. This is Rob Reinhold. It is May 2nd. I cannot believe that it's already May, but the market just keeps going all the time. So let's take a look at today's performance. And let me first start out that April was the worst month for stocks since 2008. We had the S&P down about 8%, the NASDAQ down over 12% in 1 month. Those are big moves. And this really ties into what we talked about in our currency room video over the weekend, that we are reaching extreme levels. And whenever we reach extreme levels, we get extreme moves up and extreme moves down. And so this is just confirmation that this is where we are right here, the big point of volatility. The markets actually ended up putting a gain on the board today. The SPX up 0.5%. Crypto was basically flat, oil up a little bit. But let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at the SPX here. So we broke down below support, and we have talked about how markets like to pierce support. So we use that term pierce. And you can see there was at one point this morning that the market was like, uh-oh, it's bad again. However, by the last hour, hour and a half, the market had rallied back and actually closed higher. If you take a look at the internals of the market, the advanced decline line was still negative. And if you took out what Apple, Microsoft, Google, Tesla, what they contributed to the market gains, the market would have been down today. And so we can't ignore the fact that this is a hammer candle here. And we actually closed higher than we opened. So there was a net buying this day. We can't ignore the fact that we do have a hammer candle. However, I am not sold that this is the bottom. I need to see a little bit more price action than what we saw today. So for me, I'm looking at the SPX saying, okay, I'm no longer as bearish as I was over the weekend, but yeah, going from like a -3 to a -2. The VT, the Vanguard Total World Stock Index, did the same thing, pierced below, gave us a hammer candle. So basically, it didn't make any of the bears happy, and the bulls are now like, oh, maybe I'm saved. Maybe that was the bottom. Yeah, we'll see. Cryptos did not do anything other than lose a gain today. This candle here is not great for cryptos because, after a bottoming out here, you say, hey, you know what? We want to see some follow through. It did for a little bit. Then the sellers came back in and it actually ended down for the day. So we still don't like the cryptos to the long side. We still think there are better short entries than anything. So as I said, just because of this hammer candle, because we do have this potential reversal candle, we do have to get off the bearishness a little bit. So we're going from a -3 to a -2 and just saying, okay, will we now have to wait and see what happens with tomorrow's bounce in equities and also what happens this week. But speaking of this week, this is the first week of the month. They are always busy months as currency traders, lots of stuff going on. We got the ISM from the US today that was disappointing. Missed it by 2 points, and that's a big number. That's a sign the economy is slowing in the future. But take a look at what we have on the schedule this week. Tonight, we've got RBA. Now look, it's on the schedule as Tuesday, but it's 12:30 a.m. Eastern time. For some of you, it's going to be the 3rd. Some of you, it's going to be the 2nd, based on where you are. But that is tonight. We are going to be meeting live during this rate announcement, looking for potential trading setups and trading this one together. On Wednesday, we have the FOMC coming out with their rate decision. That's going to be a big mover. And then we've got Bank of England coming out on Thursday. So we have 3 central banks this week. We looked at the schedule this week. We said, hey, look, we don't like the trading Monday, Tuesday-ish. Actually, I shouldn't say Tuesday. Really, after the RBA comes out, I think there could be some decent trading opportunities. And you can see we also have employment from New Zealand. So we do like Aussie Kiwi on Tuesday, at least looking for velocity. Remember, at Maverick, we always focus on what's moving. If it's not moving, we don't trade it. If it's moving, we look to trade it. The velocity in Aussie and Kiwi is likely to be elevated over the next 24 hours. Once we get through this period, then we get into Wednesday, then it all of a sudden becomes about the dollar, and that's going to move everything. The Federal Reserve. And then Bank of England, and then you can see Friday, we've got both US and Canadian employment. So lots of stuff on the calendar this week, lots of reasons to be excited for this trading week. Let's take a look at the currencies one by one. First off, let's look at performance today. The cryptos, not much happened in the big ones. Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, Litecoin, all plus or minus 1%. We saw some of the lower quality coins give up a little bit more. Overall, more bearish than bullish in cryptos. In the foreign currencies, we had the yen as the standout. Now, we talked about the yen. It's been absolutely decimated. And now that we have a pretty strong risk-off move, we actually think the yen is likely to bounce a little bit. We don't think this is a long-term trend change in the yen. We have to wait until that's proven. But short-term, we do think the yen probably has a little bit more to go to the upside. Because it's in such a bad chart on the daily chart, we prefer the dollar. Now look, today it was the second best currency. So we step down a little bit in quality and say, hey, you know what? The dollar is showing a much more consistent trend. So we liked dollar long going into this week and CAD long going into this week. And we liked Kiwi short at the first of the week. And we liked pound short after we got through their bounce that they had at the end of last week. And you see today that the pound got some selling today, which tells us likely that little bounce we had at the end of last week was over. And we'll take a look at the pound, but I think it's shortable at this point here. Everything else, Euro, Swiss franc, Aussie, really nothing going on there to talk about. So let's take a look at them all individually. Starting out with Bitcoin, I'm on a 4-hour chart and I'm just looking at velocity. That's all I'm looking at. So I'm trying to identify, of all the currencies we can trade, which one is moving right now. I don't care if it's up or down, because we'll trade it if it's up or down. But we need to identify, is it moving? And we take a look at Bitcoin, we could see a flat EMA, we see a flat RSI, we see nothing in parabolic SAR that tells us to get excited about it. This is just not going anywhere. It's just not going anywhere. There's no reason at all to look to trade this. On to Bitcoin Cash, and you can see the same thing. We have flattened out. Everything's flattened out. These are terrible times to trade. We don't want to trade in the times where it's doing nothing. We want to trade in the times that it's trending. Right now, we're doing nothing here. Time to move on to the next one. Now, Ethereum is starting to look better. Look, we don't love any of the cryptos here, but if you say, hey, I want to look to buy a crypto here, Ethereum is clearly better than Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash here. We actually have an EMA that's sloping up. We've got an RSI that's now making a new high. We're breaking out of this last resistance level. Look, we don't love it. We don't think there's a lot upside, but if you are going to trade a crypto on the long side, Ethereum is the one. And Litecoin is actually showing a little bit of strength as well. Litecoin is on a much weaker daily chart than Ethereum, which tells us that it's likely not going to have as big of a bounce. So we still prefer Ethereum of anything. But like I said, this is a very, very short-term outlook. We think that maybe a couple hours tops before they roll over again. So we definitely don't like cryptos at the long side. Let's jump into our foreign currencies. This is our dollar basket. This is our proprietary dollar basket that we take a look at. And you can see this is why we prefer the dollar basket over the yen, because it's more consistent. It's consistent and steady. Rising EMAs, rising parabolic SAR, elevated RSI levels. Everything in this chart is telling us that the buyers are in this currency right now. Now we could switch over to the Japanese yen, and you can see we did have a big run. We had a big run. We had a pullback. It's not as steep. So we're still getting bullish stuff. We're still getting a rising EMA. We still now pierced above the parabolic SAR, but it's just not as strong. As you can see, it's more susceptible to pullbacks than we saw out of the dollar chart. Now I'm going to run through Swiss franc and euro pretty quickly here, and I think you can see why. This is a terrible trading position. It's not really going anywhere. It's moving a total of about 25 to 40 pips. That's a terrible range. Until it does something, you just need to skip trading on Swiss franc. Euro is going to look the same way. It's got a little bit more of a range here, but ultimately, nothing is telling us. I mean, this is the last 24 hours. Nothing is telling us that it's going anywhere. Until we get that velocity, we have to just be waiting patiently. Okay, now this is the interesting trade. We talked about this over the weekend, and I talked about how pound had a big bounce at the end of last week, which was right here. And I said, I want to be a seller when it gives that up. We are right there. So what we want to see is we want to see EMA sloping lower. We want to see this break below the parabolic SAR. We want to see this RSI in a downtrend. We are right there. We're right there. It hasn't happened yet. But with the break of a parabolic SAR, one or two more red candles, I think we have a nice alert here on pound to say, okay, pound is now shortable. It looks like it's moving to the downside. But again, that's going to be a little bit off. Let's check in on CAD here. We did like CAD long this week, but the velocity wasn't there. So we actually have had CAD at a -2 velocity score and a +3 trend score, saying, hey, the trends are really good, but right now it's not moving. It's actually pulling back a little bit. This thing has a little bit of work to do before it gets any sort of buys. Again, it's got to do what we just saw, the opposite of the pound. It's got to get above the parabolic SAR. The EMA has to slope up, and this RSI starts to trend up as well. Ultimately, Canadian dollar is probably on the back shelf for the next 24 hours. Checking in on the Aussie, you can see ultimately the Aussie has just gone nowhere really over the past week and a half. We've traded in this range. We are heading into the RBA. So if it wasn't for the RBA rate statement announcement tonight, I'd tell everyone, hey, look, just don't even worry about trading Aussie. Check in on it later. Okay, we have big news tonight. There is going to be a move. We have no idea whether it's going to be to the upside or the downside. But as traders, we don't care. We don't care which way it is. We are direction agnostic. All we care is that it moves and moves with velocity. We are going to be meeting live tonight. We're going to be watching this trade setup as it happens. And really, you can see here, when it breaks out of this range it's been in, is either going to be a long or a short. We'll see which one happens. But at this point, there's really nothing to do here on Aussie. And the last one, the Kiwi. And you can see the Kiwi is the only currency that is really giving us a flat out sell signal. We've got a EMA that's going down. Now, yes, we do have about 6 candles here that have flattened out. This is what we call a low base. We really love these bases. Bases to sell into or to buy are fantastic. Once this thing breaks below this lower range, again, there's another entry triggered on this one here. So our favorite pairings this week were Kiwi Dollar to the short side. It was a so-so trade today. We'll take a look at it, but that's it. So this is where we were at the start of the week with the cryptos on the weekend, Kiwi on the weekend, and the pound and the euro at the end of last week were actually showing some relative strength. Well, what has happened is the euro has weakened a bit. We've seen the yen strengthen a bit. We've seen the pound weaken substantially, and we've seen the dollar strengthen. So again, we were waiting for that pound to weaken on the velocity score, and we're starting to see that. And, we got to bump CAD up a little bit. It's looking okay. But ultimately, as you can see here, we don't like to trade anything in the +1 to -1 area. These trades are basically saying, hey, there's not enough going on right now. So we are really isolated to Kiwi Dollar short and Kiwi Yen short. So let's take a look at those. I'm going to start off with Kiwi Dollar. So here is Kiwi Dollar. I'm on a 4-hour chart here, and you can see the 4-hour chart is telling us, hey, this thing has just fallen, little rally, fall, base, fall, rally, fall. Again, we know it's in a base here. It might bump up a little bit into a rally, but what we do know is we want to be short. So the question is timing. So I'm going to go into the 1-hour chart, one level closer here for an entry. And the big question is, okay, where is the entry? Looking at where we are right here, right now, we are trading mostly sideways. Maybe this is more of a descending triangle than a true base here. We want to wait for this triangle here to break down. Ultimately, 64.14 is going to be a great place to set an alert, saying, hey, when it breaks below this point, we're breaking down. It looks like it's a good entry point. Could you make a case of an entry up here? Yes. Again, it's rallied up to its trend line. It's having a little bit of trouble there, but I'm just not seeing emphasis. So we really talk at Maverick about keeping your powder dry, about only firing at the best trades. Don't just shoot everything that moves. Wait for those moments. And I think we're going to get a much better moment later this week. So ultimately, I don't really love anything until I see what the Aussie does after the RBA. Let's check Kiwi Yen. And we can see the Kiwi Yen, we're getting similar price action. We're seeing the same thing. So Kiwi Yen, 83.45. 83.45 for an alert and a possible entry here on that one. But again, no reason to think that it's going to happen right here, right now. There's compressed energy at this point. There's just not a lot going on. So it's better off to just wait for those entry points. So to wrap this up, the markets close at its high, so we could bounce into tomorrow. I imagine that the Asian session, the Chinese stocks, the Japanese stocks are probably going to be more up than down overnight. That's going to lead into Europe waking up and being optimistic, and it probably leads into the US session starting on a positive note. I think rallies are going to be faded. And so if we do get a rally tomorrow morning, I would not be surprised by the end of the day if it is completely faded back down. So what does that mean for currencies? Well, it means that cryptos are just uninteresting here. And really dollar and yen long are the best trades. But those trades are going to be best when equities fall. So if we have a strong session overnight, you really don't want to be looking at these trades because they're going to perform best when the equity markets turn down. I do like that pound short. It needs a little bit more, just a little bit more to trigger. But I think maybe in the next 4 to 16 hours, we could get a nice trigger on the pound. And then all of a sudden now we can pair up pound dollar short, pound yen short, and look at those pairs as well. Thanks for joining me. Take care.